Brethren, the charge to the initiate is the title of the presentation that I've taken from Solomon today. In summary, a detailed explanation of the language of Freemasonry, with particular reference to the charge to the initiate in the craft. The charge to the initiate. The ritual of Freemasonry is a product of the early decades of the 18th century, much of it phrased in the language of that period, together with other words and phrases taken from biblical and historical sources. If we spend time and effort studying the words of the ritual, we will discover that the thoughts and teachings contained therein could be modernized, but undoubtedly would lose something in the process. Consider the charge to the initiate, which is normally delivered by the senior or junior warden, or a senior member of the lodge. We need to examine the meaning of the words within the charge to provide a better understanding of this important part of our ritual, remembering that the initiate has by this time been subjected to an experience like no other. It is therefore incumbent upon the brother delivering the charge to do so with empathy and at a pace which can be followed. So, here goes, the charge in the first degree. As you have passed through the ceremony of your initiation, let me congratulate you on being admitted a member of our ancient and honourable institution. Ancient, no doubt it is, having subsisted from time immemorial, and honourable it must be acknowledged to be, as by a natural tendency it conduces to make those so who are obedient to its precepts. Consider the meaning of ancient and honourable. Ancient, without dwelling too much on the history of Freemasonry, because it is right that we should recognise and observe the Grand Lodge of England was established some 300 years ago. But the origins of Freemasonry go back long before that. The dictionary definition of honourable is a guide or rule for morals, or a rule or principle for action, and in this context can be described as standing for rules or morals as an automatic way of life. This is picked up in the next sentence. Indeed, no institution can boast a more solid foundation than that on which Freemasonry rests, the practice of every moral and social virtue. And to so high an eminence has its credit been advanced that in every age monarchs themselves have been promoters of the art, have not thought it derogatory to their dignity to exchange the sceptre for the trowel, have patronized our mysteries and joined our assemblies. This statement is true inasmuch that it is claimed that royalty brought and registered a degree of class, charisma, and gentlemanly behaviour to the early Freemasonry, and this was instrumental in the 1700s and 1800s to people wanting to be part of the system. 23 princes of the royal family have been brethren of the craft since 1737, 8 of whom have held the office of Grand Master. King George II, 1727 to 1760, established links with Freemasonry, but it was his son Frederick Lewis, the 15th Prince of Wales and heir to the throne, who entered the craft in 1737 at a lodge in the Palace of Kew and became the first royal Freemason. Hence the speculative use of the term Lewis, meaning son of a mason. Operative masons had used a Lewis for many years to lift or lower stones. Lodge number 259, the Prince of Wales Lodge, was founded by King George IV in 1787, when he was Prince of Wales, George Augustus Frederick, the grandson of Frederick Lewis. King George VI was initiated in December 1919 into the Navy Lodge number 2612 and was a very committed Mason, although never Grand Master. He did install his younger brother, Prince George, Duke of Kent, in 1939, who died some 3 years later on active service in the Royal Air Force. The king then installed his brother-in-law, the Earl of Harewood, as Grand Master, and then 5 years later installed the Duke of Devonshire in that office. The present Grand Master, the Duke of Kent, was installed in 1967 on the 250th anniversary of the foundation of the first Grand Lodge. As a Freemason, let me recommend to your most serious contemplation the volume of the Sacred Laws, charging you to consider it as the unerring standard of truth and justice, and to regulate your actions by the divine precepts it contains. The volume of the Sacred Laws can be the Bible, Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist, Taoist, and Hermetic texts, or any other sacred book adopted by the sacred teachings of the world. The Book of Constitutions makes it clear that the volume of the sacred law used is that which is held by a brother's particular creed to impart sanctity or promise taken upon it. The word unerring in this context implies standards which are consistently accurate or certain, and precepts being a rule, guide or principle to abide by or to action. Therein, you will be taught the important duties that you owe to God, to your neighbour, and to yourself. To some, God can mean a supernatural being who is worshipped as the controller of some part of the universe, or some aspect of life in the world, or is the personification of some transcendental, otherworldly, metaphysical, or all-pervading, universal, divine, or spiritual force. To others, God is the sole universal divinity being eternal, spiritual, and transcendent, who is the creator and ruler of all and is infinite in all attributes. To God, by never mentioning his name, but with that awe and reverence which are due from the creature to his creator, by imploring his aid in all your undertakings, and by looking up to him in every emergency for comfort and support. By believing in a divine being, such belief and faith may help us in our endeavours to provide solace when the need arises, or when we are confronted by problems in our daily lives. To your neighbour, by acting with him on the square, by rendering him every kind office that justice and mercy may require, by relieving his necessities and soothing his afflictions, and by doing to him, as in similar cases, you would wish he would do to you. In short, this means brotherly love, relief, and truth. Brotherly love is the feeling of kinship and closeness to a person or a group of people. It not only brings together those with common interests, for example, Freemasons, but is acting for the most common interest of all, that we are all human beings seeking to live on this planet, as the charge terms us, citizens of the world. Relief is described in the dictionary as a feeling of reassurance and relaxation following release from anxiety or distress. It is the realization of the opportunity to provide assistance of any kind within reason and given to those with a special need or who are experiencing difficulty. Additionally, in a Masonic context, relief has a more central focus upon charity. Truth is that perception that we have of the infinite divinity which infuses all existence. Remember the wonderful quote from the long version of the Second Degree Working Tools. In all his pursuits to have eternity in view, this is how one lives with truth. And to yourself, by such a prudent and well-regulated course of discipline as may best conduce to the preservation of your corporeal and mental faculties in their fullest energy, thereby enabling you to exert those talents wherewith God has blessed you, as well to his glory as to the welfare of your fellow creatures. This passage is arguably one of the most important parts of our ritual, as it epitomizes what we as individuals strive for. The words that stand out in this highly relevant passage are prudent, conduce, mental, corporeal, and welfare. Prudence, the act of showing care and thought for the future. Conduce, to help and bring about a particular situation or overcome. Mental, the relationship to the mind. Corporeal, the relationship to our body rather than our spirit. Welfare, meaning to our health, happiness, and fortunes. We have all been blessed and endowed with talent, i.e. a natural aptitude or skill, and for many who have discovered their abilities, they are able to use them either directly or indirectly to the benefit of themselves and their fellow man. Many who, through their Freemasonry, have discovered or realized their talents will know that the rewards can be considerable in terms of enjoyment, achievement, and satisfaction. As a citizen of the world, I am to enjoin you to be exemplary in the discharge of your civil duties, by never proposing or at all countenancing any act that may have a tendency to subvert the peace and good order of society, by paying due obedience to the laws of any state which may for a time become the place of your residence or afford you its protection, and above all, by never losing sight of the allegiance due to the sovereign of your native land, ever remembering that nature has implanted in your breast a sacred and indissoluble attachment to that country from whence you derived your birth and infant nurture. This passage of the charge is literally self-explanatory and requires little addition, other than to explain that it is incumbent upon us all to obey the law of the land at all times, and above all to show our patriotism by vigorously supporting our country and those who rule over us. Freemasons show their allegiance on a number of occasions in their ceremonies. We close our meetings with the singing of the national anthem. The toast of the Queen is the first of the official toasts, and it is usual for a photograph of the Queen to be displayed in lodge rooms. As an individual, let me recommend the practice of every domestic as well as public virtue. Let prudence direct you, temperance chasten you, fortitude support you, and justice be the guide of all your actions. Be especially careful to maintain in their fullest splendour those truly Masonic ornaments which have already been amply illustrated. I mean benevolence and charity. This is another highly important passage in our ritual. It yet again directs us to focus on ourselves and charges us to conduct our lives within the bounds of moderation and to be true to ourselves. Let prudence direct you, the act of showing care and thought for the future. Let fortitude support you, courage in pain or adversity. Let temperance chasten you, by restraint and by moderating your approach to alcohol and all other aspects of life. Let justice be the guide of all your actions, not just behaviour or treatment, but the quality of being fair and reasonable. We are all finally reminded of the need to show benevolence, our kind and well-meaning support of charity by the voluntary giving of help in so many different ways. Still, as a Freemason, there are other excellencies of character to which your attention may be peculiarly and forcibly directed. Amongst the foremost of these is secrecy, fidelity, and obedience. Secrecy consists in an inviolable adherence to the obligation you have entered into, never improperly to disclose any of those Masonic secrets which have now been or may at any future period be entrusted to your keeping, and cautiously to avoid all occasions which may inadvertently lead you to do so. Your fidelity must be exemplified by a strict observance of the constitutions of the fraternity, by adhering to the ancient landmarks of the order, by never attempting to extort or otherwise unduly obtain the secrets of a superior degree, and by refraining from recommending anyone to a participation of our secrets unless you have strong grounds to believe that by a similar fidelity he will ultimately bring honour upon your choice. At this stage, the initiate is being asked to recognize what he has already pledged, to be faithful to the cause in his obligation, and by sealing it with his lips on the volume of the sacred law. Landmarks are left without strict definition, but it is clear that at the heart of them is a belief in divinity, with brotherly love, relief, and truth. Your obedience must be proved by a strict observance of our laws and regulations, by prompt attention to all signs and summonses, by modest and correct demeanour in the lodge, by abstaining from every topic of political and religious discussion, by a ready acquiescence in all votes and resolutions duly passed by a majority of the brethren, and by perfect submission to the master and his wardens whilst acting in the discharge of their respective offices. In this passage, the initiate is being asked to adhere, submit, and obey, which commitment is fundamental to our order. It must be recognized that it is incumbent upon us all to make sure that a candidate for Freemasonry is supplied with the necessary information to be able to understand what he is committing himself to before his initiation, as required by the Book of Constitutions, our laws and regulations, signs and summonses. There remains the question of what we meant by a perfect submission to the master and his wardens, which is why mentoring is so important in providing the initiate with the information or advice. And, as a last general recommendation, let me exhort you to dedicate yourself to such pursuits as may at once enable you to be respectable in life, useful to mankind, and an ornament to the society of which you have this day become a member. To study more especially such of the liberal arts and sciences as may lie within the compass of your attainment, and, without neglecting the ordinary duties of your station, to endeavour to make a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. In this passage, we are restating that the initiate should behave in such a manner as to be respected by his fellows, and to do good by them, and to be an example to others. Whilst we refer to the liberal arts and sciences in our ritual, the modern interpretation is to satisfy our curiosity about Masonry and develop our understanding, but to do so without impinging upon our domestic and business commitments and duties. From the very commendable attention you appear to have given to this charge, I am led to hope that you will duly appreciate the value of Freemasonry and indelibly imprint on your heart the sacred dictates of truth, honour, and virtue. A dictate is an order or principle that must be obeyed. Hence, we are invited to find truth is that perception that we have the infinite divinity which infuses all existence. Honour, that by which we bring credit to our order with high respect and esteem, and virtue, which is behaviour showing high moral standards, and quality which is considered to be morally good or desirable in ourselves. In conclusion, the charge in the first degree is a significant part of our ritual. Some words have been changed over the last 2 centuries, and other words still used now have a different meaning. Some say it would be rewritten and put into a new English version. You will form your own opinion on this subject. The function of language is to communicate, and if the words used have changed their meanings or become less well known over the centuries, that may be considered a good case for modernizing some of it, i.e., such as bodily rather than corporeal. That said, part of the impact of the charge is its use of language, and modernizing it might well diminish it and make it less effective and less memorable. When delivering the charge, it is important that the initiate feels he is being addressed personally, so that it will remain in his memory as one of the most impressive parts of the ceremony. But we should also make sure that, during his initial curiosity about Freemasonry, he is suitably informed to be prepared to gain a full meaning of the charge through mentoring. We should all accept that Freemasonry stands for brotherly love, relief, and truth. And the brother delivering the charge concludes by stating that, "I am led to hope that you will duly appreciate the value of Freemasonry and indelibly imprint on your heart the sacred dictates of truth, of honor, and virtue." Hence, we must ensure that the Masonic interpretation of these qualities and attributes are understood by the initiates, as these are the basis of our order. Further, courtesy, charity, decency, honesty, integrity, loyalty, reliability, and tolerance are the concepts that we must further extol, as these are the perceptions of ourselves that we would wish to advocate in the wider community. Brethren, that completes this presentation, a very important part of our Masonic ritual. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have, and I thank you for your very kind attention.